The original Xiaomi Mix device took the world by storm with its near bezel-less display back in 2016, which paved the way for other smartphone companies to start trimming down their bezels. Following the same formula, Xiaomi released the Mi Mix 2 and 2S in 2017 and 2018 respectively, by slightly improving the form factor but keeping the fundamentals the same, with the selfie cameras found on the bottom bezels of the device. 7 months after the Mix 2S, Xiaomi announced the Mi Mix 3, which introduced a sliding mechanism at the top of the screen to hide its top-mounted selfie cameras in order to maintain an almost bezel-less design by cutting off the bottom chin. It took nearly 3 years, but we finally have a successor to the Mix 3, and its name, you guessed it, the Mi Mix 4. Not only is this Xiaomi's very first mass-produced smartphone to incorporate an in-display selfie camera, but the world's first announced phone to pack in Qualcomm's latest flagship processing chipset, the Snapdragon 888 Plus. With all that said, it's time to deep dive into my extremely detailed, full review of Xiaomi's Mi Mix 4. The Mi Mix 4 comes in 3 different color variants. You can pick it up in either black ceramic, white ceramic, or the color that I have, a shadow gray, which is also ceramic. It looks absolutely phenomenal with this gray finish and comes packed with a 4500 mAh battery, 120 watt wide charging, 50 watt wireless charging, IP53 dust and splash protection, Gorilla Glass Victus display, a tiny aluminum frame wrapping around the phone, as well as a ceramic backing wrapping to the display. Of course, the back does pick up a fair amount of fingerprint smudges, but at least we do get included a silicone case in the box, which is good to use on day one. Not the classiest case around, but it will do the job on day one. We have a power button and volume rocker on the right hand side. We have a dual SIM 5G standby tray at the bottom of the phone. No option for expandable storage, unfortunately. There is indeed a water resistant seal. We have USB 2.0 Type-C at the bottom, and the first dual speaker, which is tuned by Harman Kardon at the bottom. Another one at the top next to the IR blaster. We do have an in-display selfie camera over here. It is just showing now because of the cutout in the screen protector, and at the back the cameras are quite hefty. Well, that camera rectangular block is pretty hefty, pretty much the biggest around, on par with the Mi 11 Ultra, meaning that when on a flat surface it is going to suffer from quite a bit of surface wobble. The back design doesn't necessarily look the most unique around, with other phones looking slightly more impressive, though it is slightly lighter than other flagship devices around at 225 grams and pretty thin at 8 millimeters in thickness. The back design is arguably pretty amazing, I guess you could say, but the front is where it is all happening thanks to that on-display selfie camera, leading us to an uninterrupted 6.67 inch AMOLED 20:9 aspect ratio curved display. It is unfortunately only Full HD Plus, with a pixels per inch of 395, 1300 nits peak brightness, 120 Hz refresh rate, and 480 Hz touch sampling rate. Of course, when compared to the Mi 11 Ultra, it is lacking a slightly larger and more pixel-packed WQHD Plus panel with quad curves. However, it is not lacking a completely uninterrupted bezel-less display thanks to the under-display tech seen in the Mi Mix 4. But I should inform you that sometimes it is visible outdoors when you are viewing different colored backgrounds and the display is angled. But the good thing is that it is not visible at all with a white background even when outdoors. The reason the Mi Mix 4's under-display camera sensor is just so darn near to invisible is because they use micro diamond pixel patterns with 400 pixels per inch screening over the camera to ensure great clarity and reduce a haze effect. And when compared to other panels around, seeing no notch whatsoever at the top of the screen is phenomenal, not to mention that we are lacking quad curves, which I actually prefer, and the curves are quite subtle. The color accuracy is just on point with the rest of the devices over here, and it is also pretty darn bright if you ask me. The white color balance is once again on par with other flagship smartphones around, even though it is cheaper than those phones, but the brightness is not the highest up there. The good thing is that it's not the dimmest device around. There are other devices that can't get quite as bright as the Mix 4, but once again, the best thing here is that looking at that ugly ass notch on the iPhone, it is not apparent at all on the Mi Mix 4. Of course, we are lacking a WQHD Plus panel, which all the other phones here have, but we do have 120 Hz refresh rate, which is something that the iPhone lacks. Maybe that will change pretty soon. Nevertheless, it is just as smooth and just as fluid as the Mi 11 Ultra P50 Pro and Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. You can fluctuate between 120 and 60 Hertz, but not on the fly. You actually have to choose the option. There is no option for auto refresh rate so that it can choose it between apps in order to preserve battery life. And there is no adaptive refresh rate either. We do have automatic brightness, of course, and you can adjust the brightness as you'd like manually. We also have anti-flicker mode, but you can't keep 120 Hertz on at the same time. We have reading mode to make your bezel-less display smartphone feel like a book, and we have a whole bunch of different color schemes with adaptive colors to change based on the ambient light currently in the room, which is impressive to say the least. Of course, we have other AI features such as super resolution, AI image enhancement, AI HDR enhancements, and MEMC, which can boost up the frames per second in native 60 Hertz media files. Of course, we also have dark mode over here, which gets nice, deep, and black, and it can be used with third-party apps as well, such as Facebook, of course, first-party apps too. And yes, we also have an always-on display clock over here, and we can display it in a scheduled manner. We can just tap the display to view it, or we could keep it on all the time. There are loads of options pre-installed. The outer space one is arguably my favorite over here if I am going for something glamorous, though we do have kaleidoscopes too. I'm a pretty simple guy, so I'm not the biggest fan of all these things, especially customizing your always on display like this. You can do it, but I prefer the simple stuff. Just the plain white clock there, it looks great. We do have an under display optical fingerprint sensor when paired up against the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. Since it's using the exact same one, it is identical, slightly faster than the Huawei P50 Pro. It is not quite as quick or as reliable as the ultrasonic Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, and the iPhone lacks any form of fingerprint recognition, so we're sticking to 3D face unlock over there. The Xiaomi is faster than that. The Xiaomi uses 2D face unlock, much like we see in the Mi 11 Ultra. Once again, on par in terms of speed with that. The Huawei P50 Pro has now ditched 3D face unlock for 2D face unlock, so on par with that. And the Samsung and the iPhone is on par with it, but you got to remember that the iPhone, you have to flick up in order to unlock your device. That's not the only thing about the selfie camera though, which you cannot see because it's inside of the screen. It is a 27mm under display selfie camera. It is 20 megapixels with an aperture of f2.2. Taking a selfie snap with good lighting conditions looks pretty darn great if you ask me. With the sun in the background, does a pretty great job. But if you do have the sun behind you and you're taking the snap, it doesn't really know how to control light very well. But if you have it in the reverse manner, it takes one of the best selfie snaps I can arguably say around. It really does do a great job, but not necessarily the best in terms of edge detection. This is Technic recording a 1080p at 30 FPS video using the brand new Mi Mix 4. The Mi Mix 4 is completely capped at 1080p and 30 FPS, unfortunately, when using the selfie cam to record video, unlike previous or recent Mi 11 devices that can go all the way up to 60 FPS when using a selfie video recording. Let me know what you guys think of the audio and video quality when using the video of an under display selfie camera. And there is also a similar feature to what we've seen recently known as frontal audio sound. It only picks up the microphone from in front of the phone and filters out all background noise. So let me know if you guys can hear a difference. This is Technic recording a 1080p at 30 FPS video on this, the Mi Mix 4, and 1080p at 60 FPS video on this, the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. Let me know which one you guys think looks the crispiest and sounds the best in terms of mic quality. You got to remember that the Mix 4 is capped at 30 FPS when using the selfie cam to record video, while the Mi 11 Ultra can go all the way up to 60 FPS. When it comes to comparing the selfie pictures against the Mi 11 Ultra, you can clearly see the Mi 11 Ultra is coming out on top with better edge detection over there. And at night, it takes a better lit up shot with night mode off. Night mode on is even better. The Mi Mix 4 lacks night mode when using the selfie cam, and with the flash on, doesn't know, once again, how to handle the light quite right with that white screen coming through. When it comes to nighttime selfie video, once again, the Mi 11 Ultra is outshining over here and can record all the way up to 60 FPS, where the Mix 4 is locking at 30 frames per second. Of course, using that one individually and seeing it in its own, I would say it doesn't do a half bad job, but it's really hazy and quite pixelated. 20 megapixel selfie in the front at night doesn't look the best, even with bokeh on. Once again, that flash kind of ruining the shot as well. When it comes to the back, we are kitted with a 12mm ultra wide 13 megapixel snapper, a 24mm 108 megapixel ISOCELL HMX main sensor with laser autofocus and optical image stabilization. Though you've got to bear in mind that this is the exact same sensor seen inside the Mi 10, Mi 10 Pro, and Mi 11. We also are kitted with a 120mm periscope telephoto lens, which is of course 8 megapixels and can go all the way up to 5 times optical zoom. Taking a look at the ultra wide shot, it doesn't look too bad. It's pretty filled with detail. The main 108 megapixel shot non-binned looks okay. The binned one looks even better. Going into 2x digital zoom, we can use the 108 megapixel mode for this, or we can use the bin down 27 megapixel mode. Going into 8 megapixel periscope, 5x optical zoom looks great. 10x digital, not too shabby. Going into 30x digital zoom, it starts to pixelate a bit. Going into 50x, which is the max, is pretty unusable if you ask me. 27 megapixel main here, once again binned down using the bokeh portrait effect. Now with the 12 megapixel, for some reason it jumps down to 9:1 pixel binning when using the portrait mode, though it still looks pretty fantastic with pretty much no edge detection. 8K 24 frames per second video is the highest resolution that we can get. We can get higher frames, but only using different resolution modes. 8K looks pretty fantastic over here, as Xiaomi have been doing for the last year or so, and nothing to complain about when it comes to 8K, 4K, 60 frames per second, nice and fluid and smooth. This is the sweet spot for me. If your phone cannot do 4K 60 FPS, you may as well buy a new one. Just kidding. For those out there, 4K 30 FPS is still fantastic. Going into 1080p, 60 frames per second. Obviously, all of these using gyro electronic image stabilization, which is what is used for video. Things are nice and stable. 1080p doesn't look as detailed as 4K, but 60 FPS nonetheless nice and smooth. We also have a 1080p 30 FPS video mode when using AI video, which kind of pops out all the colors, but in my opinion is pretty useless since it drains all the detail. 4K 30 FPS is the max FPS that we can use when recording 4K at ultra wide. Once again, using a gyro electronic image stabilization here for a nice steady wobble free effect. 1080p 60 FPS is the only mode that we can use 60 frames per second at with a high-ish resolution when using the ultra-wide cam. Looks pretty great if you ask me. 1080p 30 FPS using AI video and ultra-wide. Once again, we have AI video this time with the ultra-wide sensor. Once again, pretty useless if you ask me, since it drains all the detail. Of course, we also have the focus testing here, which I've decided to throw in. It doesn't do too much of a bad job when jumping into focus, in and out of focus. And we do have bokeh video here, though it is lacking support for high resolution and frame rate. Of course, we also have steady video. It is currently off at the moment, and throwing it on for some strange reason, it jumps to 2x zoom. Doesn't do a terrible job, though it is capped at 1080p and 30 frames per second. Comparing the stability to the Mi 11 Ultra using the same steady video, the Mi 11 Ultra has better stability, and the Mi 11 Ultra also has steady video Pro, which is lacking in the Mi Mix 4, and it tends to use more of an ultra wide perspective for an even more fluid experience, giving you something more close to a GoPro. The Mi 11 Ultra compared to the Mi Mix 4, Mi 11 Ultra of course being on the right hand side. Comparing 8K video over here, things are identical, with the Mi 11 Ultra showing slightly more detail, and comparing 4K 60 FPS, once again the Mi 11 Ultra shows almost no camera wobble or shake at all, where it is slightly present on the Mix 4 because of the HMX sensor, where the Mi 11 Ultra is using a Samsung GN2 sensor, which is one of the best sensors around. 4K at 60 frames per second over here using ultra wide on the Mi 11 Ultra, and we're capped at 30 FPS using ultra wide on the Mi Mix 4. Showing the main photos over here, going through a bunch of regular bin down shots. Remember, the Xiaomi is jumping down from 50 megapixel 4:1 binning to 12.5, where the Mi Mix 4 is using 108 megapixels 4:1 binning to 27 megapixels. And it's not all about the megapixel count, it is about the lens as well, and the Xiaomi sensor is quite a bit larger than the Mi Mix 4's lens, which gives you more detailed and more depth effect shots, especially when taking portrait shots over here. You can see that the Mi 11 Ultra is separating its subject from its background slightly better than the Mix 4, only on some occasions though. On other occasions, sometimes it looks like the Mix 4 is doing a better job. There is no macro mode option at all on the Mix 4. Mi 11 Ultra does still have that. And going into 5x optical zoom over here, you can see the sheer amount of detail on the Mi 11 Ultra thanks to the 48 megapixel telephoto sensor. 48 megapixel ultra wide on the Mi 11 Ultra is also bin down, which looks slightly better than the Mi Mix 4. And going into the main sensors, bin down once again over here, they are very similar if you ask me. I do think that the Mi 11 Ultra does handle light a tad more than the Mix 4. Periscope is the biggest difference over here, 8 megapixels on the Mix 4 as opposed to 48 on the Mi 11 Ultra, which can be used in 48 megapixel mode or bin down to 12 megapixel mode, which looks even better if you ask me. But once we get to 50 times zoom, they're pretty similar, and the Mi 11 Ultra can of course go all the way up to 120x zoom. Taking snaps at night over here, ultra wide looks slightly better on the Mix 4 with night mode off or on, and with night mode off with the regular shot over here, pretty similar results if you ask me. The Mi Mix 4 actually looks slightly better taking a night mode on shot on 1x zoom, and for some strange reason, once the periscope should kick in at 5x and even 10x, it doesn't do so on the Mix 4. It sticks to digital zoom, but then it goes to periscope once and using optical zoom once we turn night mode on. Very strange over there. Mi 11 Ultra drops 60 FPS down to 33 FPS when recording 4K at night to brighten it up. The Mix 4 doesn't do that because of processing. And the Mi 11 Ultra and Mi Mix 4 at 1080p 30 FPS using AI video, once again, doesn't look necessarily the best on either device. 8K 24 frames per second on the Mix 4 over here. Very hazy, very pixelated, but it is 8K at night. What do you expect? 4K 60 FPS, slightly better. Still got that slight haze effect though. We got to drop down the FPS to 30 FPS in order to see it brighten up. 1080p 60, once again, still quite dim, but looking at the street doesn't look too bad. Ultra wide is pretty much unusable, as we've seen in all Xiaomi flagship devices, or any other flagship device for that matter. And using 1080p 60 FPS ultra wide looks even worse because of the high frame counts over here. But turning on AI video 30 FPS on the Mix 4 doesn't necessarily brighten it up on the right hand side, but it does control the lighting effects a lot better. And shooting at ultra wide at night looks fantastic. Night mode on looks even better. Going into the 1x over here, night mode off, not too shabby, but night mode on looks like a picture perfect painting. And going into the 27 megapixel bin down from 108 2x zoom doesn't look half bad with night mode off and on. But once we reach 5x, once again kicks the digital zoom, looks better with night mode on because it's actually using the periscope camera. Doesn't use the periscope camera again with night mode off at 10x digital zoom, but it does turn it on when switching on night mode. Now the interesting thing here, night mode off, 1x, 2x, but we do have super moon zoom, once again returning to Xiaomi over here. I have turned it on over here. It jumps between 5x, 20x, 30x, 40x, and 50x. It looks pretty fantastic. It does get a bit blurry sometimes. You really have to be steady with your hand. I'm not quite sure if this is the actual moon or just a photo that Xiaomi has pre-installed on their phone. Nevertheless, it looks pretty great. Of course, we do have 120 watt wide charging. Advertised is 15 minutes 0 to 100. I did a test recently, capping it at 21 minutes. Still pretty quick though, not what they advertised. 50 watt wireless charging over here, and we also have 10 watt reverse wireless charging, which is pretty nifty, same that we saw on the Mi 11 Ultra earlier on this year. And we can also charge our accessories too. We do have boost mode in order to boost up the phone quicker when charging, and optimized charging in order to slow things down and just trickle the last few percent just before you wake up. We are skinned with MIUI 12.5.4 Enhanced Edition over Android 11 over here, and even though it is not dramatically changing the software as a whole, we'll have to wait for MIUI 13 for that. It does indeed increase the performance and supposedly increase the optimization of the phone's software working with its hardware, though we'll have to wait and see once we start doing some performance testing very soon. We do have a wallpaper and personalization menu this time around, where we can change the wallpaper, of course, and we have our wonderful super wallpapers, with the new one being Snowy Peaks, and it changes throughout the day. Of course, it does have a 3-phase change when unlocking and locking the phone, but it changes throughout the day. It looks absolutely fantastic. I wish more phones did this. Of course, we also have the geometry ones as well, which don't really change throughout the day, but still look pretty fantastic. We can also adjust the always on display from here, as well as the clock on the lock screen, the icons as well, and switch between the wallpapers. Of course, fingerprint animations, there's some new ones over there, as well as incoming call notifications, giving you that edge lighting coming through. And we also have a bunch of different notification features, as well as alarms which play different sounds on different days and dates. Of course, we do have Google services over here, and yes, the Google Play Store does work as well. This is the Chinese variant. Unfortunately, this won't be coming to the global variant, so you're going to have to import one if you do want one. We do have ultra wideband technology, though I couldn't really find it. All I could find here was Magic Control, and it only seems to work with compatible Xiaomi devices. The haptics are pretty great, just as good as any other phone around, and we do have a dual stereo Harman Kardon speakers, but how does it stack up to two of the best sounding phones around? The Mix 4 comes with an overclocked Snapdragon 888 known as the 888 Plus with a max core clock speed of 3 GHz. It is apparently 20% more powerful than the vanilla Snapdragon 888 chipset, and we do have a performance mode enhancer within the settings. I haven't seen that on a Xiaomi device before. And we of course also have Game Turbo. When you click on it, it says Game Space. A little bit strange. Nevertheless, you can do a bunch of things on the interface, and once you're in a game, you have a bit of an overlay over here. No FPS overlay on screen all the time, which kind of sucks, but you can use that through the developer options, which I'll do in a moment. And we do have something called combos now, which are pretty much like macro keys that we see within gaming smartphones. Pretty nifty. You tap a bunch of buttons, then you just tap one to initiate that entire combo. We also have a timer. We can also change the look of the display entirely, which is pretty neat. And going into our first game of 5 over here, Genshin Impact, with the highest possible graphic settings and max frames per second, sitting at around 58 frames per second, and then it drops and it goes to under 25 FPS, and it sits at around 20 frames per second the entire time of my playthrough over here, with loads of stuttering and yes, some overheating too, which I'll show you in a sec. Vary between 17 and 58 frames per second. It is the most demanding game out there, but this shouldn't be happening, especially since it wasn't happening on the Mi 11 or Mi 11 Ultra before it. So yes, there is overheating. PUBG Mobile, unfortunately, no 90 frames per second option yet. Though the game is capped at 90 FPS, it's only available on certain phones. This is still a Chinese released phone, so the global version of PUBG doesn't have the 90 FPS option, though it is sitting at a solid 60 since the game is capping it at 60 and not necessarily the device itself. Bullet Force, another game with ultra high graphics and max frames per second reaching unlimited, which is pretty great. We're sitting at between 105 and 121 FPS. Things are looking a lot better when playing a slightly less graphically demanding game such as Bullet Force when compared to Genshin Impact. Going into Dead Trigger 2, once again, it does have an unlimited frame cap in the game itself, but it's not supported by the device yet, and we can't get ultra high graphics either. We're stuck to high and 60 FPS, but it's sitting at a solid 60 FPS, and on Real Racing, it can go all the way up to 120 frames per second, and it's sitting between 114 and 121 FPS, which is a fantastic, rounding off the gaming section there with a bit of a bang. Going into benchmarks over here, of course, we have that Snapdragon 888 Plus CPU, Adreno 660 integrated graphics over here, and testing out the battery drain at the start. It's 4,500 mAh cell as well as its temp. We'll compare that at the end of the test. We are going to be using performance mode over here and going into Game Turbo / Game Space, starting off with AnTuTu version 9.1.1 and jumping into our next benchmark, which is testing out the CPU only, Geekbench version 5. Just doing a CPU benchmark on that one and wrapping things off with 3D Mark Wildlife, focusing just on GPU. The battery drain at the end of the 3 benchmark run drained by 8% with a drain rating of 20 mAh per minute, which is a hell of a lot better than the 27 mAh per minute drain of the average Snapdragon 888 smartphones on my channel. When it comes to temps, it is pretty hot here in Shanghai, China, so the temps don't look the best, but what we do need to focus on is how much it adds, and it only added 11.3 degrees in Celsius, where the average Snapdragon 888, the vanilla chipset of this Snapdragon 888 Plus, usually jumps up by 18 degrees. This only jumped up by 11, which is definitely seeing an improvement. We have gotten close to 850,000 in terms of score on AnTuTu version 9 from the OnePlus devices, but the devices that I've showed on my channel here today, the Mi 11 Ultra, S21 Ultra, and Huawei P50 Pro running a Kirin 9000 chipset, that is, have all been beat by the Mix 4's result of 811,056 points. Things don't look too fresh when it comes to the Geekbench score, though it did beat the P50 Pro's Kirin 9000 chipset. It was behind the Galaxy S21 Ultra and Mi 11 Ultra housing the vanilla Snapdragon 888 chipset, and of course behind the crown champion of Geekbench runs, the iPhone 12 Pro Max. When it comes to 3D Mark Wildlife, focusing on graphics, slightly better than the Geekbench run. It was slightly better than the Mi 11 Ultra with 34.3 frames per second as opposed to 33.3. It beat the S21 Ultra as well, but now the Huawei made Kirin 9000 chipset is slightly above the Snapdragon devices with 36.4 FPS, and once again, the one at the top, the iPhone 12 Pro Max with 47 FPS, but nevertheless, the Xiaomi did a fantastic job with a score of 5,724 points. The Mi Mix 4 is an incredible phone to say the least. It has a stunning ceramic gray back design, which wraps all the way to the display, and even though I would have loved to see a matte color variant, the glossy finish looks extremely elegant. The only gripe I have with the back design is the boring rectangular camera bump, which Xiaomi has been using on almost all of their smartphones in the past year. Inside that camera block, however, sits a trio of of more than capable optics, and while they take phenomenal photos and videos, they are no match for other flagships around, especially when compared to its more expensive brother, the Mi 11 Ultra. But this phone is more than just design and cameras. The Mi Mix 4 is Xiaomi's very first smartphone to use in-display selfie camera technology, and does so incredibly well by making room for a bright and vibrant uninterrupted 6.67-inch AMOLED display, but unfortunately lacks crispy clear selfie photogenic moments. The Mi Mix 4's software is largely the same as it's been since the release of MIUI 12, but coming with MIUI 12.5 enhanced out the box, Xiaomi has supposedly increased performance and optimization. The phone comes with impressive hardware specifications such as the beefed up Snapdragon 888 Plus CPU, LPDDR5 RAM, and UFS 3.1 storage, which when paired with the fluid 120Hz refresh rate and 480Hz touch sampling rate, games like an absolute champion most of the time, but unfortunately still suffers from heating issues. The Xiaomi Mix 4 is certainly a unique device, but falls short in terms of display resolution, flagship leading camera quality, and an IP68 certification, which all of its competitors have managed to include. But not only does the Mi Mix 4 have faster wired charging at 120 watts, extremely fast 50-watt wireless charging, and a Snapdragon 888 Plus CPU, it is also the only true flagship material smartphone to house an under-display selfie camera, which in its own right makes Xiaomi's incredible Mi Mix 4 extremely hard to beat.